The warm aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the small cafe, mingling with the soft hum of quiet conversation. A gentle bell chimed above the door as a man in an expensive suit walked in. His name was Michael Bennett, and he was a millionaire businessman, one of the wealthiest men in the city. He had just finished a long meeting and was now looking for a moment of peace. All he wanted was a simple cup of coffee. He stood in line at the counter, running his hand through his dark hair, lost in his thoughts. The cafe was a favorite of his, a small, unassuming place tucked away from the noise of the city. It wasn't the kind of place a millionaire like him typically frequented, but there was something about its calm, homey atmosphere that made it his go-to spot when he needed to think. The barista behind the counter greeted him with a warm smile. "Hi, Michael." "The usual?" He nodded. "Yes, please. A large cappuccino." As Michael pulled out his wallet, a small voice interrupted him. "Excuse me, sir," came a soft, hesitant voice. He turned and saw a little girl standing beside him. She couldn't have been more than 10 years old, her clothes a bit worn but clean, and her shoes clearly a few sizes too big. She looked up at him with wide, curious eyes, and her hands were clasped nervously in front of her. Michael raised an eyebrow, slightly taken aback. "Yes, I noticed you were getting your coffee," the little girl said, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't mean to intrude, but I have some change here. Would it be okay if I paid for your coffee?" For a moment, Michael stared at her, his brow furrowed in confusion. What was she saying? A little girl offering to pay for his coffee? She held out a few crumpled coins in her small, outstretched hand. The gesture was so innocent, so sweet, that Michael was momentarily speechless. The coins barely added up to more than a few dollars, but the look in her eyes was so genuine it caught him off guard. "Are you sure?" Michael asked, bending down slightly to meet her gaze. "You don't have to do that, sweetheart. It's my treat." The little girl smiled shyly, her cheeks pink. "I have a little money, sir. I don't need it, and I thought maybe you'd like to save yours for something else." Michael was still stunned by her kindness. He had seen a lot of things in his life, but something about this little girl's selflessness hit him harder than he expected. "Thank you," he said softly, his heart suddenly heavy with emotion. "That's very kind of you." The little girl's smile widened as she handed him the coins, and for a moment, everything around Michael seemed to blur. The cafe, the people, the city outside, none of it mattered. It was just him and this girl, this moment of kindness that seemed so out of place in the harsh world he lived in. He paid for his coffee, and the barista handed him the warm cup with a smile. As Michael moved to walk away, the little girl lingered by the counter. Michael stopped for a moment, looking down at her again. "You know, you're a very kind young lady," he said, his voice full of admiration. "Not many people would do something like that. What's your name?" The girl looked up at him, her expression softening. "Lily," she replied quietly. "Lily Parker." Michael smiled. "Well, Lily, I'll be sure to pay it forward. Thank you for reminding me that kindness still exists in the world." Lily's eyes lit up, and she nodded. "You're welcome, sir." With a final smile, Michael walked out of the cafe, his thoughts swirling. Something about Lily's gesture stuck with him. It wasn't the money; he could easily pay for 100 coffees, but the simplicity of the act. She had offered what she could, even if it was small, and that had meant more to him than he could put into words. What Michael didn't know, as he walked back into the bustling world of his high-powered life, was that this seemingly random act of kindness was the start of something much bigger, something that would change everything for him. And as for Lily, she hadn't known it either. But there was something extraordinary about her, a connection to Michael that neither of them could have ever imagined. A week passed, and Michael tried to put the memory of Lily in the cafe behind him. He was a busy man, after all, with meetings, business deals, and countless obligations. But he found himself thinking about the little girl more than he expected. Why had she offered to pay for his coffee? What was her life like? Why did she seem so familiar? One afternoon, as he sat in his luxurious office, reviewing a set of contracts, Michael received a phone call that pulled him out of his thoughts. It was from his lawyer. "Mr. Bennett," the lawyer began, "there's something we need to discuss." "It's urgent." Michael frowned. "What's going on?" There's a situation with your family. Your biological family. Michael's blood ran cold. He had been adopted as a child, and though he had never thought much about his biological parents, he knew it was a part of his past he couldn't ignore forever. What about them? Michael asked, tried to keep his voice steady. It's about your birth records. There's someone who claims to be your daughter, Michael. Michael's heart stopped. My daughter, he repeated, confused. Yes, her name is Lily Parker. The world seemed to tilt beneath him. Michael stared at the phone in disbelief. Lily Parker, this little girl who had paid for his coffee, was his daughter? His mind raced, trying to make sense of it. He had to know more. He had to find out the truth. The lawyer continued. There's a woman named Grace Parker. She claims she's the mother of your daughter. She wants to meet with you. Michael sat back in his chair, the shock of the revelation washing over him like a tidal wave. How could this be? He had no memory of ever meeting Grace Parker, and yet, here was this little girl, Lily, who had somehow come into his life in the most unexpected way. He was being pulled into a web of questions, each one leading him to the same conclusion. Lily Parker wasn't just a kind stranger in a cafe. She was his daughter, and now everything was about to change. Michael sat frozen, the phone still pressed to his ear. His mind was racing, but no words came out. Lily Parker, my daughter? He had always known he was adopted, but the idea of having a biological child was something that had never crossed his mind. He couldn't even fathom how this could be possible. Who was Grace Parker? How had this happened? The lawyer's voice broke through his thoughts, still on the other end of the line. Mr. Bennett, I understand this is a lot to process, but I believe this matter is urgent. Grace Parker insists that she has proof, and she's willing to meet with you at your earliest convenience. I've scheduled a meeting for tomorrow. Michael's mouth went dry. I don't know what to think. I've never heard of Grace Parker. How could this be real? The lawyer sighed. I know it's a lot, but I assure you, we're looking into it. You may want to consider meeting her. If this is true, there could be legal ramifications, and I recommend you be prepared. The weight of the situation began to sink in. What if it's true? What if I really do have a daughter out there? He rubbed his temples, trying to steady himself. Fine. Set up the meeting. I'll be there. After hanging up, Michael sat back in his chair, the events of the last few days swirling in his mind. The coffee shop, Lily's sweet gesture, and now this. Could it all be connected? Was it possible that this little girl, this humble, innocent girl who had bought him coffee, was his daughter? He couldn't help but think about the way she had acted. There was something familiar about her. The way she looked at him, the way she spoke. It tugged at his memory in a way he couldn't quite place. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock on his office door. Mr. Bennett, his assistant, Emily, entered with a stack of papers in her hands. I've got the reports you asked for. Michael barely noticed her presence as he sat at his desk, his mind consumed by the meeting tomorrow. Thank you, Emily. I'll look at those later. Emily noticed the tension in his posture. Is everything all right? You look distracted. Michael gave her a tight smile. Yeah, just family stuff. He waved her off, not wanting to get into the details. But even as he tried to focus on the papers in front of him, his mind kept wandering back to Lily. The next morning, Michael found himself in his car, heading toward a small, quiet cafe across town. His meeting with Grace Parker was set to take place at 10 a.m., and his nerves were on edge. He couldn't shake the thought of Lily and what her connection to him could mean. When he arrived at the cafe, he stepped inside, immediately noticing the serene atmosphere. The place was modest, much like the coffee shop where he had met Lily. It felt warm and inviting, a far cry from the polished, sterile office spaces Michael was accustomed to. He spotted Grace Parker immediately. She was sitting at a table in the corner, alone, with a cup of coffee in front of her. She was in her mid-30s, dressed casually, with long brown hair that fell loosely around her shoulders. She looked up when Michael entered, her eyes filled with cautious anticipation. Michael approached her table, his heart pounding. Grace Parker. She stood up, offering him a polite smile. Mr. Bennett, please have a seat. He sat across from her, trying to maintain some semblance of composure. I don't know how this is possible. I don't remember meeting you, and I'm not sure how. Grace interrupted him gently, her voice calm but firm. I know this is a lot to take in, but I assure you, Michael, I'm not here to confuse you. I'm here to tell you the truth." She paused, letting her words settle in the air. "Lily is your daughter. She was born 10 years ago. I never meant for you to find out this way, but I couldn't keep it a secret any longer." Michael's breath caught in his throat. "Lily," he repeated, his mind reeling. How could you be sure?" Grace reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. She slid it across the table to him, and Michael opened it cautiously. Inside were several pieces of paper, birth certificates, hospital records, and a DNA test result. His eyes skimmed over the documents, his pulse quickening as he read each one. The DNA test results confirmed it. Lily Parker is Michael Bennett's biological daughter. Michael sat back in his chair, stunned. His eyes flicked from the papers to Grace, disbelief still clouding his thoughts. "You're telling me that I have a daughter?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Grace nodded slowly, her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and regret. "Yes, Michael, but it wasn't planned. After Lily was born, I was in a difficult place. I wasn't in a position to reach out to you. I made mistakes, and I've spent years trying to protect her. But now, I'm asking for your help." Michael's mind raced, trying to absorb what was happening. He had no memory of Grace, no recollection of the night she must have gotten pregnant. His life had been so different back then, focused solely on his career, on his ambition. The thought of having a child, of being a father, had never crossed his mind. "Why didn't you come to me earlier?" Michael asked, his voice sharp with a mix of frustration and confusion. "Why wait until now?" Grace's eyes filled with emotion. "I wasn't sure if you'd want to know. I didn't want to complicate your life. But Lily deserves to know who her father is. She deserves more than what I can give her." Michael sat there for a long moment, absorbing her words. This was his daughter? He didn't know what to feel. He wanted to be angry, but at the same time, there was a sense of wonder creeping in. A part of him, deep down, wanted to embrace this unexpected reality, to figure out how to make it work. Before he could speak again, the door of the cafe opened, and in walked a familiar face, the little girl from the coffee shop. Lily. She spotted Michael immediately and hesitated for a moment before walking slowly toward the table, her eyes cautiously meeting his. Michael's heart skipped a beat. There she was, his daughter, standing right in front of him. The girl who had unknowingly paid for his coffee only a week ago. The girl who had, without knowing, changed his life forever. Lily stood at the table, looking at him with a mixture of curiosity and confusion. "Hi," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael swallowed hard, his emotions swirling. "Hi, Lily." And just like that, everything changed. Lily stood at the table, her small frame hesitant as she looked at Michael. The weight of the moment pressed down on him like a ton of bricks. This little girl, standing before him, was his daughter. The realization hit him harder than he could have ever imagined. He stood up slowly, his heart racing in his chest. "Lily, I didn't know. I had no idea." She glanced between him and Grace, her eyes wide with uncertainty. "Are you really my dad?" Her voice trembled, the words coming out more like a question than a statement. Michael didn't know how to answer. His entire life had just been flipped upside down. He had no memories of Grace, no recollection of ever being a father, and yet here she was, Lily, his daughter. Grace, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke, her voice soft yet steady. "Lily, this is Michael, your father. I know this is a lot to take in, but you deserve to know the truth." Lily's gaze shifted back to Michael, and for a moment, there was an intense silence between them. Michael's heart ached as he watched the little girl struggle to make sense of what was happening. She had no idea who he was, and he had no idea how to bridge the gap between them. "I don't understand," Lily said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why didn't you come for me? Why wasn't I with you?" Michael felt the weight of her question hit him like a blow. He had no answers, no good explanation for why he hadn't been there for her. He wanted to reach out to her, to tell her everything would be okay, but he didn't know where to start. Grace's voice cut through the silence again. "Lily, your father, he didn't know about you. I didn't tell him. I thought it was better that way. But now, we could be a family. We can fix this." Lily's brow furrowed as she glanced at her mother. A family. She shook her head, clearly confused. But I don't know him. I don't know anything about him. Michael's heart sank as he watched Lily pull away slightly, instinctively distancing herself from him. He couldn't blame her. She had no reason to trust him. He was a stranger to her, and he had failed to be the father she needed all these years. I understand, Michael said softly, his voice filled with regret. But I want to get to know you, Lily. I want to be part of your life. I know I can't change the past, but I'm here now, and I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. Lily looked up at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. But why should I believe you? You don't even know me. Michael's heart broke for her. She was right. How could she trust him? They were both standing on the edge of an unknown future with no guarantees. But Michael was determined to make it work. For Lily, for Grace, for all of them. Grace looked at Michael with a mixture of hope and sorrow. Lily, I know this is overwhelming, but it's going to be okay. We'll take it one step at a time. Lily remained quiet for a long moment, her eyes flicking between her mother and Michael. Then, slowly, she took a deep breath and nodded. Okay, she said quietly, but you have to promise me something. Michael leaned forward, desperate to connect with her. Anything. Promise me you'll try, Lily said, her voice soft but firm. Promise me you'll really try to be a dad. Michael nodded, his throat tight with emotion. I promise, Lily. I will try with everything I have. A small, uncertain smile tugged at Lily's lips. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Just then, Grace placed her hand gently on Lily's shoulder. We're all in this together now. We'll figure it out, one day at a time. Michael nodded, the weight of the promise settling in his chest. He wasn't sure how to be a father, not yet. But he would learn. For Lily, the following days were a blur. Michael did everything he could think of to help Lily adjust to the sudden change. He spent time with her, getting to know her little by little. He found out that she loved drawing, that she was shy around new people, but had a big heart. She was smart, funny, and full of life, just like he had always imagined a child would be. It wasn't easy. There were moments of awkwardness, times when they both struggled to understand each other. But Michael was patient. He learned to listen when Lily spoke, to watch the way she looked at things, to pay attention to the little things that made her who she was. And slowly, bit by bit, they started to build a bond. It was in the little moments that Michael felt the most connected to her, when he brought her a cup of hot chocolate and she smiled up at him, or when they spent hours in the park, kicking a soccer ball back and forth. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was more than Michael had hoped for. One evening, a week after their first meeting, they were sitting on the couch together, watching a movie. Lily had her head resting on his shoulder, her small hand in his, and for the first time since he learned about her existence, Michael felt a deep sense of peace. This was where he was meant to be. You know, Lily said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence. I think you're going to be a good dad. Michael's heart swelled in his chest. You really think so? Lily nodded, her eyes glancing up at him. Yeah, you're trying. That's all I need. Michael smiled, his throat tight. I'm going to keep trying, Lily. Every single day. For the first time in his life, Michael felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. And in that moment, he knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together. But as they sat there, the weight of the past seemed to still linger. There were questions still unanswered, things still left unsaid. Michael had learned that Lily wasn't just a child in his life. She was a part of him. But was there more to the story? And who else would they meet along the way? The truth had only just begun to unfold. The quiet peace of that evening was fleeting. For the first time, Michael felt truly connected to Lily, but the weight of the situation still pressed heavily on his mind. The truth had come crashing into his life, unraveling everything he thought he knew about himself. He had only just begun to form a relationship with Lily, but already there was a gnawing feeling that there was more to this story, something that neither he nor Grace had fully uncovered. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, Michael sat alone in the living room, his thoughts swirling. The weight of everything he had learned over the past week was beginning to settle in. His life had been upended, but it wasn't just the shock of learning about Lily that haunted him. It was the lingering question about how he could have missed so much. Why hadn't Grace told him sooner? What was she hiding? He thought back to the cafe where he had met Lily. The way she had offered to pay for his coffee. It had been such a small, selfless gesture. And yet, now, knowing what he knew, it felt like fate had played a hand in bringing them together. But how had Grace kept Lily from him for so long? He couldn't help but wonder if there was more to the story that Grace wasn't sharing. His phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a message from his lawyer. "Michael, I've just received some new information. We need to talk." Michael's pulse quickened. It wasn't unusual for his lawyer to send updates, but there was an urgency in the message that made his stomach drop. He quickly dialed the number. "Hello, Mr. Bennett." The lawyer answered, his voice clipped. "I've just uncovered something troubling." Michael's heart skipped a beat. "What is it? What did you find?" "There's a second birth certificate, one that wasn't filed with the hospital records," the lawyer said, his tone grave. "It seems there was another attempt to conceal Lily's parentage, but this one involves a different name, someone you may know." Michael froze. "What do you mean? Who else is involved?" The lawyer paused for a moment before speaking again, his voice dropping lower. "It appears that Grace wasn't the only one keeping secrets. There's another man connected to this, someone who's been involved with Grace in the past. His name is James Parker." Michael's mind raced. James Parker? That name meant nothing to him, but his gut instinct told him that this was far from a coincidence. "James Parker," Michael repeated, his voice growing tight. "Who is he? Why wasn't I told about him?" "I'm still gathering information, but it seems James Parker was once a part of Grace's life in a much deeper way than you may have thought. He has some legal claim to Lily as well. If this is true, Michael, there could be implications beyond just the birth certificate. We need to dig deeper." The words hit Michael like a hammer. A legal claim to Lily? He had thought that everything about Lily's background had been settled. But now it seemed like this situation was far more complicated than he had ever imagined. "I need to know everything now," Michael said, his voice cold with determination. "What do you mean a claim? Does he think he's her father?" "I'm not sure yet," the lawyer responded, "but I'll be investigating. You'll hear from me soon." Michael hung up the phone, his mind reeling. His thoughts kept going back to Grace and Lily. He had promised Lily that he would be there for her. But how could he be a father if there was someone else out there who also had a claim to her? What did this mean for their future? As Michael sat in the darkened living room, the weight of everything pressing down on him, he knew one thing for certain. This was far from over. His family was built on lies and secrets, and now, more than ever, he needed to uncover the truth. For Lily, the next day, Michael made arrangements to meet Grace. He needed answers, and he wasn't leaving until he got them. He arranged to meet her at a small park near her apartment, away from the prying eyes of the city. When Grace arrived, she looked calm, but Michael could tell from the way she avoided his gaze that something was off. She was wearing simple jeans and a sweater, but the tightness in her posture spoke volumes. "Michael," she said softly, sitting down beside him on a bench. "I didn't expect you to want to meet again so soon." "I need to know what's going on, Grace," Michael said, his voice steady but firm. "There's something you haven't told me. Something about Lily's father." Grace stiffened at his words, and Michael noticed her jaw clench. "What are you talking about?" "I know about James Parker," Michael said, his voice low. "He's connected to Lily. He has some kind of claim to her. Why didn't you tell me about him?" Grace's face paled, and for a moment, she looked like she was struggling to find the words. "I didn't think it was necessary," she finally said, her voice shaky. "James was a part of my past, and I didn't want to bring him into Lily's life." "It's complicated, Michael." "Complicated?" Michael nearly shouted, frustration bubbling over. "I've just learned that I have a daughter, and now you're telling me there's another man who could be involved? I need to understand, Grace. Why didn't you tell me?" Grace turned her face away, her eyes filled with emotion. "I thought I was protecting her," she whispered. "I thought keeping James out of her life was the best thing for her. He wasn't a good man, Michael. He wasn't the kind of man I wanted around Lily. So I kept him away." Michael's mind raced. James Parker wasn't a good man? But why? What had happened between Grace and this man? "I need to know more, Grace," Michael said, his voice softer now. "For Lily's sake." Grace hesitated, and then her voice cracked. "James was abusive. That's why I left him. When I found out I was pregnant, I knew I couldn't raise a child with him. I didn't want him to have any part of Lily's life." I wanted to protect her. Michael's chest tightened with sympathy for Grace, but also with a deep, growing anger toward this man, James. How could he have been so blind to all of this? Grace, Michael said, his voice filled with determination. I understand, but this isn't just about protecting Lily anymore. It's about giving her the truth. I don't want her to grow up not knowing where she came from. I'm going to make sure she knows the truth, no matter what. Grace nodded, her face filled with a mixture of guilt and relief. I just want Lily to be safe, and I want her to know that I did what I thought was best for her. Michael stood up, his resolve firm. I'm going to take care of this, Grace. I promise. But as he walked away from the meeting, a nagging thought lingered in the back of his mind. James Parker might have been in the past, but the future was still uncertain, and he would do whatever it took to protect Lily from the dangers that still loomed ahead. The conversation with Grace had left Michael with more questions than answers. It had been a heavy revelation, one that shook him to his core. James Parker, the man Grace had left behind, was no mere figure from her past. He was a potential threat to Lily's future. Michael had promised to protect her, but how could he do that when he barely understood the full story? As he drove back to the safe house, his mind churned with worry. The idea that someone had abused Grace and that Lily could have been exposed to that, not at him. His protective instincts flared. He couldn't let Lily grow up with unanswered questions or a hidden past that could come back to haunt her. When Michael arrived at the house, he found Lily sitting at the kitchen table, sketching something quietly. She had been drawing more often over the past few days, and each time Michael looked over her shoulder, he marveled at how deeply she expressed herself through art. Her drawings were simple, yet full of emotion. Lily looked up as Michael entered. Hey, Dad, you're back early. Michael smiled at her, though his heart was heavy. Yeah, I had to take care of some things. Lily's eyes narrowed slightly. She had grown more accustomed to calling him Dad in the past week, but the words still felt new and strange to both of them. The relationship was still fragile, and Michael knew that Lily wasn't sure how to trust him completely, nor was he sure how to be the father she needed. I heard you talking to Mom, Lily said, her voice low, almost as if she were testing the waters. Are we going to be okay? The simple question broke Michael's heart. She was so young, but already so wise in the ways of life's complexities. We're going to be just fine, Michael said softly, walking over to the table and sitting beside her. He gently placed a hand on her shoulder. I'm here now, Lily, and I'm going to make sure we all have the life we deserve. Lily nodded slowly, but didn't say anything more. Her eyes returned to her drawing, but Michael could tell that there were still doubts in her mind. He wished there was a way to fix everything immediately, to make her feel completely safe and loved, but he knew it would take time. The next morning, Michael received another message from his lawyer. It was an urgent update. Michael, we found something. James Parker has been spotted in town. We need to act quickly. Michael's heart skipped a beat. James Parker was here? That was not what he had expected. He had been hoping to avoid any confrontation with Grace's past, but now it seemed like the storm was coming right for him. He immediately called his lawyer. Mr. Bennett, I don't want to alarm you, but James has made contact with one of our investigators. He's demanding a meeting with you. He says he wants to talk about Lily. Michael's stomach dropped. He wants to talk about Lily? The idea of meeting with James Parker filled him with dread. Everything in his gut told him that this wouldn't be a civil discussion. I'll meet him, Michael said, his voice cold and decisive. But I need you there with me. We can't trust him. I agree, the lawyer responded. I'll make sure we're prepared. But Michael, please be careful. We don't know what he's capable of. Michael didn't say anything at first. His mind was already working through the possible scenarios. What was James Parker really after? What did he want with Lily? The more he thought about it, the more his instincts told him that this meeting could be a turning point in the battle to protect his daughter. Arrange the meeting, Michael finally said, his voice firm. And let me know the details as soon as possible. Later that afternoon, Michael stood at the front of the safe house, looking out the window at the bustling streets beyond. It was hard to reconcile the life he had before this, successful, detached, and business-oriented, with the man he had to be now. He was responsible for Lily. He was responsible for her safety and her future. And yet, here he was, preparing for a confrontation with a man who had been a dangerous part of Grace's life, and who now posed a threat to everything Michael was trying to build. When the time came, Michael was ready. His lawyer, Mark, met him outside the safe house, and together they made their way to a neutral location, an upscale hotel conference room where James had insisted on meeting. As they entered, Michael's tension only grew. The weight of the situation was heavy on his shoulders, and his gut churned with unease. James Parker was already there, sitting at the table, his face expressionless. He was a tall man, with dark hair, a clean-shaven face, and a presence that radiated confidence. Or was it intimidation? Michael couldn't quite tell, but he could see the calculated look in James's eyes. This man was no stranger to power. "Mr. Bennett," James said with a cold smile as they approached the table. "I've been expecting you." Michael didn't respond immediately. He studied James carefully, his mind still racing. He wanted answers, but more than that, he wanted to know why James was suddenly in the picture. He wasn't about to let this man manipulate him, not with Lily's future on the line. "Let's get straight to it," Michael said, taking a seat across from James. "What do you want with Lily?" James leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled together. His gaze never left Michael's. "Lily is my daughter, too," James said, his voice low and firm. "I want what's mine." Michael's fists clenched involuntarily, but he forced himself to stay calm. "You're not a part of her life," Michael said firmly. "And you won't be, not while I'm here." James raised an eyebrow, clearly amused by Michael's reaction. "Is that so? You think you can just step in her life and replace me?" He chuckled darkly. "You think this will all just work out because you say so?" Michael's blood boiled, but he kept his cool. "I'm here to protect her, and I will do whatever it takes to keep her safe." There was a long silence between them, and for a moment, Michael wondered if this conversation was even worth having. James wasn't there to negotiate. He was there to intimidate, to claim what he thought was rightfully his. "I don't think you understand, Mr. Bennett," James said, his voice suddenly softer, almost too calm. "There are things about Lily's life, about her past, that you don't know. Things Grace never told you. And now you're involved. You can't just walk away from this." Michael leaned forward, his voice sharp. "What are you talking about? What aren't you telling me?" James paused, a knowing smirk crossing his face. "You'll find out soon enough, Mr. Bennett. All you need to know is that I've always been a part of Lily's life. And I'm not going anywhere." Michael's head spun as the weight of James's words sank in. There was more to this than he had anticipated, more that James was hiding. But Michael wasn't about to let him manipulate the situation. He stood up abruptly. "This conversation is over. Stay away from Lily. If you come near her, I'll make sure you regret it." As he turned to leave, James's voice called out behind him. "You don't know the whole story, Mr. Bennett, but you will." Michael's pulse raced as he left the room, the chill of James's words hanging in the air. There was more to this than he realized, and the truth was only just beginning to unravel. The drive back to the safe house felt like an eternity. Michael stared out of the window, the familiar city streets passing by in a blur, but his mind was consumed by the meeting with James Parker. His words echoed in Michael's head, each one laced with a chilling promise. "You don't know the whole story, Mr. Bennett, but you will." What was James trying to say? What was the hidden truth about Lily that Michael hadn't been told? His stomach churned with unease, and the more he thought about it, the more the questions piled up. By the time he arrived back at the safe house, his hand was shaking. He took a deep breath before stepping out of the car, but even then, the tension in his chest didn't ease. He had to protect Lily. He had to make sure that James stayed away, no matter what it took. But something told him the man wasn't done yet. As Michael entered the house, he found Lily sitting at the kitchen table again, her sketchbook open in front of her. She was so focused on her drawing that she didn't notice him at first. "Hey, kiddo," Michael said softly, trying to keep his voice steady. Lily looked up, her face lighting up with a smile. "Hi, Dad. How was your meeting?" Michael hesitated, his eyes flicking to her sketchbook. It was a simple drawing of a house, a home, it seemed, complete with the sun shining brightly overhead. It made Michael's heart ache. He sat down across from her, forcing a smile. "It was interesting, but we'll talk about it later." Lily nodded, sensing his tension. Okay, you're still looking worried. You'll figure it out though, right? Michael took a deep breath, trying to keep his composure. I'm doing everything I can, sweetheart. You're going to be safe. But even as he said those words, he didn't believe them fully. He couldn't shake the feeling that something big was coming, something he wasn't prepared for. Lily looked up at him, her eyes softening. I trust you, Dad. Those words hit Michael harder than he expected. In that moment, he realized that Lily was more than just a little girl. She was his responsibility now, and he would do whatever it took to protect her. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice gentler. I'm not going to let anything happen to you, Lily. I promise. The next morning, Michael couldn't shake the feeling of dread. He had barely slept, the weight of everything pressing on him. The meeting with James Parker had left him with more questions than answers, and the fact that he couldn't trust Grace completely made everything more complicated. His thoughts were scattered, but he knew one thing for sure. He had to keep Lily safe. He tried to get some work done, but it was hard to focus. His mind kept wandering to Grace's past with James, and the more he thought about it, the more it didn't add up. Grace had always seemed so strong, so capable. But now, Michael was beginning to question whether there was more she hadn't told him about her relationship with James, and what Lily's life had really been like before he came into the picture. As he sat at his desk, trying to distract himself with emails and business calls, his phone buzzed. It was a message from his lawyer. Michael, I found something else. You need to come to my office immediately. This could change everything. Michael's heart skipped a beat. He had hoped the situation would calm down, but now it seemed like everything was escalating faster than he could handle. He grabbed his coat and headed out the door, a sense of urgency driving him forward. When he arrived at the law office, the receptionist ushered him into the back, where his lawyer, Mark, was waiting. Mark stood up as soon as he saw Michael, his face drawn with concern. Mr. Bennett, Mark said, shaking his head, I don't know how to explain this, but what I found changes everything. Michael's stomach tightened. What did you find? Mark sat back down, pulling a thick folder in front of him. I managed to dig up some more information about James Parker. It turns out that he's been involved in something much bigger than we thought. He's connected to some illegal activities, money laundering, organized crime, and even connections to some dangerous people. He's been hiding in plain sight for years. Michael felt a cold shiver run down his spine. You mean he's more than just a bad ex? He's a criminal. Yes. And he's been using his connections to manipulate situations in his favor. He's got a lot of power, Michael. And now he knows you're in the picture. That makes you a target. Michael's mind reeled. So what does this mean for Lily? Mark leaned in, his expression serious. It means that if James decides to claim her, it won't be as simple as a father wanting to see his daughter. He has the resources, the power, and the connections to make this very complicated. He could use Lily as leverage. Michael's heart dropped. The idea of someone using Lily as a pawn in a criminal game made him sick to his stomach. He had promised to protect her, and now it seemed like there were forces beyond his control trying to tear them apart. Is there anything we can do? Michael asked, his voice tight with frustration. We'll need to go to court, Mark replied. We'll need to fight for custody, but it's going to be a tough battle. James won't back down easily. Michael clenched his fists, the weight of the situation bearing down on him. He had never been a man who backed away from a fight, but this was different. He wasn't just fighting for business deals or money. He was fighting for his daughter's safety, for her future. We'll do whatever it takes, Michael said, his voice filled with determination. I won't let James win. Mark nodded, but there was a shadow of doubt in his eyes. It won't be easy. James is dangerous, Michael. He's not going to play by the rules. Michael stood up, his jaw clenched. I don't care how dangerous he is. He won't touch my daughter. As he left the office, Michael's mind was spinning. He was walking into a fight, one that he wasn't prepared for. He had no idea how deep James Parker's web of deceit went. But one thing was clear. He had to protect Lily at all costs. That night, as Michael sat in the living room, staring at the phone in his hand, he realized something. The calm he had felt with Lily earlier that week was slipping away. He couldn't afford to let his guard down. Not now. Not when everything was at stake. Lily came into the room, holding her sketchbook. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with an innocence that Michael couldn't bear to take away. "I drew something for you, Dad," she said, holding up the picture she had just finished. It was a picture of a house, just like the one she had drawn the day before, but this time there were people inside it. A mother, a father, and a little girl. They were all standing together, smiling, with a bright sun shining above them. Michael's heart twisted. This was her dream. A family. A real family. And he was determined to give that to her, no matter what. He took the drawing from her, smiling through the lump in his throat. "It's beautiful, Lily," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "This is our family, and I'm going to make sure it stays that way." As Lily beamed at him, Michael felt the weight of his promise settle deep in his chest. Whatever came next, he would face it head on. He would fight for his daughter, and he would make sure that Lily's dream of a family wasn't torn apart. But little did Michael know, the battle was only beginning, and there was much more to uncover. The next few days were a blur of action and uncertainty. Michael couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. Every moment that passed seemed to bring him closer to a confrontation with James Parker, an unknown enemy whose power seemed limitless. The fight for Lily's future had become more than just a custody battle. It was a fight against a man with connections, influence, and a dangerous past. As Michael tried to navigate the paperwork, legal procedures, and the growing tension with Grace, his mind kept returning to the same thoughts. Lily had come into his life like a gift, but now, everything seemed to be unraveling before him. He had made a promise to her, to protect her. But how could he protect her from a man like James Parker? That evening, Michael sat at the kitchen table, his hands folded in front of him as he stared at a stack of legal papers. The silence in the room felt suffocating, and for a brief moment, he let himself consider what he had lost. The life he had built, the path he had chosen, all seemed so distant now. He had been so focused on success and business, but now, everything that mattered was right in front of him. Lily, Grace, and their future. The door to the kitchen creaked open, and Lily's small figure appeared in the doorway. Her eyes met his, and she hesitated for a moment before walking toward him. "Dad?" she asked softly, her voice a little shaky. Michael looked up at her, his heart aching. "Hey, kiddo, you okay?" Lily nodded, but there was a sadness in her eyes that Michael hadn't seen before. She climbed onto the chair beside him and quietly set down the drawing she had been working on. "I made something for you," she said, her voice quiet but determined. It's a picture of us, a real family." Michael felt his breath catch in his throat as he looked at the picture she had drawn. It was a house, but this time there were people outside, standing together in front of the door. There was a man, a woman, and a little girl, each one with a bright smile and arms around each other. It was a simple picture, but it spoke volumes. "That's us," Lily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Right? We're a family." Michael nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, Lily, we are a family." She looked up at him, her eyes full of hope. "Then why do you look so sad? I thought we were going to be okay." Michael felt a lump form in his throat as he reached out and took her hand. "We are going to be okay," he said, his voice steady, though the doubt gnawed at him. "But there are things we have to face, Lily. Things I didn't know about until recently. And I'm doing everything I can to protect you. To protect us." Lily's brow furrowed. "Is it about that man, James?" Michael's heart sank. She had heard more than he realized. "Yeah, it's about him. He wants to be a part of your life, Lily. And I won't let him take you away." Lily was quiet for a moment, her eyes softening as she looked up at Michael. "But what if he's not all bad? What if he wants to be a good dad?" Michael's chest tightened. "Lily, we don't know him. We don't know what he's capable of. I know you want to believe that he could be good, but sometimes people who hurt others can't change. And I'm not going to let him hurt you." Lily didn't respond right away, her gaze shifting down to the drawing. She seemed lost in thought, processing everything he had said. Michael felt the weight of her silence like a heavy weight pressing on his heart. "I'm scared, Dad," she said, finally looking up at him. "What if I don't have a real family anymore?" Michael's heart broke at her words. He could feel the weight of the responsibility bearing down on him, but he refused to let her see how much he was struggling. You do have a real family, Lily, he said softly. You have me. You have Grace. And we're going to make sure you stay with us. I promise. Lily nodded slowly, but Michael could see the uncertainty in her eyes. She was still so young, and the world was changing around her in ways she couldn't fully understand. All he wanted was to protect her, to give her the stability and love she deserved. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, interrupting the moment. Michael's heart raced, the tension in his body returning as he stood up, glancing at Lily. Stay here, he said quietly, his tone firm but gentle. Lily nodded, watching as Michael moved toward the door, his instincts on high alert. The lawyer had warned him that James could make a move at any time, but he wasn't expecting a visit this soon. As Michael opened the door, he was met with a surprise, a familiar face. Mr. Bennett, said the man, standing in front of him. I'm sorry to show up unannounced, but we need to talk. It's about Lily. It was James Parker. The tension in the air was palpable as Michael stared at James, who stood in the doorway with a calm, almost calculating expression. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes were filled with a cold, determined look. Michael stood his ground, not allowing James to step past him. What do you want, James? He asked, his voice sharp. I've already made it clear that you're not welcome here. James smiled thinly, his hands casually resting in his pockets. I'm not here to cause trouble, Michael. I just want to talk about Lily. Talk. Michael's voice rose slightly. You don't just get to walk into our lives and talk. You don't get to claim anything. James's eyes narrowed, but he didn't flinch. I'm not asking for your approval, Michael. I'm here because it's time you understood the situation. Lily deserves to know the truth about her family, and that includes me. Michael's blood boiled. You have no right to claim anything about her. You were never there for her. I was the one who's been here, taking care of her, and now you think you can just walk in and demand a part of her life. No, it doesn't work like that. James stepped closer, his presence looming. I think you're underestimating me, Michael. You don't know what I'm capable of, and you don't know everything about Lily. There are things you need to understand, things you don't even know about her past. Michael's heart skipped a beat. What are you talking about? What things? James gave him a cold smile. You'll find out soon enough, Bennett. But make no mistake, Lily is my daughter, and I'm not going to let anyone stand in my way. Before Michael could respond, James turned on his heel and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the hallway as he left. Michael stood frozen in the doorway, his thoughts racing. What did James mean? What else could he possibly know about Lily that Michael didn't? He turned back toward the living room, his face pale. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest. This was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. Lily stood in the hallway, her eyes wide with confusion. Who was that, Dad? Michael took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. That was James Parker. He's her biological father. Lily's face froze in shock. She blinked a few times, as if trying to process what Michael had just said. Her voice was small, barely a whisper. My father. Michael nodded, swallowing hard. I'm not going to let him hurt you, Lily. No matter what happens, I'll protect you. That's my promise. But even as he said the words, he knew the fight was far from over. And as Lily stood there, uncertainty in her eyes, Michael realized that the true test of his promise was only just beginning. The days following James Parker's visit were the most intense of Michael's life. Every moment felt like a race against time. The quiet peace that he and Lily had started to build was slowly being chipped away by the looming threat of James. His presence, both physical and psychological, haunted Michael as he spent sleepless nights trying to figure out how to protect his daughter. Grace had been by his side through it all, though she was just as torn as he was. She couldn't answer all the questions Michael had. She was the one who had kept James out of Lily's life, but she was also the one who had tried to shield her from the past. Still, she had to face the fact that James had been an undeniable part of their story, a truth they could no longer ignore. One afternoon, Michael sat at the kitchen table, his head buried in a pile of legal documents. His lawyer had advised him to move quickly, to file for an injunction before James could make any more moves. But the complexity of the case made it difficult to determine his next step. Lily walked into the room, her small figure approaching cautiously. Michael looked up at her, his heart aching. She had been quieter lately, her uncertainty growing with each passing day. Dad, she said softly, her voice low and uncertain. Is everything going to be okay? You've been so stressed. Michael put down the papers and turned toward her. His heart broke at the sight of her concern. The last thing he wanted was for Lily to carry the weight of this on her shoulders. He stood up and knelt down to her level, his hands resting on her shoulders. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I know this is hard, but I promise we're going to be okay. I'm doing everything I can to protect you. Lily looked up at him with wide eyes, and for a moment, Michael could see the child she still was, unsure, vulnerable, but strong all the same. But what if I'm not safe? What if James is right? Michael's heart twisted in his chest. He had never thought of James as a real threat before. But now, hearing Lily voice her fear made the reality of the situation even clearer. He pulled her into a tight hug, unwilling to let go. Lily, he said, his voice full of emotion, you are always going to be safe. I won't let anyone hurt you. I know you're scared, but trust me when I say this. No one is taking you away from me. I'm your dad, and I'll fight for you. Always. Lily's small arms wrapped around him, and for a brief moment, everything else seemed to fade away. It was just the two of them, and Michael's promise to protect her. The battle for Lily's future escalated in the days that followed. Michael and his lawyer gathered more evidence, and they managed to secure a court date for the custody hearing. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was a start. Michael knew that James wouldn't make this easy, and the fear of losing Lily haunted him every waking moment. But he couldn't give up, not now. Grace had agreed to testify on Michael's behalf, but it was clear that James's past was much darker than anyone had realized. As they prepared for the hearing, Michael learned more about James's criminal activities, money laundering, shady business deals, and even ties to dangerous people in the city. His lawyer was confident that they could present this in court as evidence that James was unfit to care for Lily. But as the court date approached, Michael realized that this was about more than just legalities. It was about Lily's future. It was about the kind of life he wanted to give her. And he knew that he couldn't do this without her. The day of the hearing arrived, and Michael stood in front of the courthouse, his stomach twisted with nerves. Grace stood beside him, her hand trembling in his as they waited to go inside. Lily, who had stayed with a trusted family friend, would be in the courtroom later, and Michael's heart ached at the thought of her having to relive everything. As they entered the courtroom, the tension in the air was palpable. James was already sitting at the front, his cold eyes watching them as they made their way to their seats. He had a smug look on his face, as if he already knew the outcome. But Michael wasn't about to let him win. The trial proceeded slowly, each side presenting their case. James's lawyer was a seasoned professional, using every tactic to paint Michael as an unfit father, despite the fact that he had been the one caring for Lily all this time. But Michael was ready. He had his lawyer, Grace's testimony, and the evidence of James's criminal past. He wasn't going to let anyone take Lily away from him. Finally, the moment of truth came. Lily was called to the stand. Michael watched as his daughter walked into the courtroom, her small face filled with uncertainty. She looked up at him, and for the first time, Michael could see the fear in her eyes. He gave her a reassuring smile, but inside his heart was breaking. Lily sat down in the witness chair, her eyes flicking between Michael and James. She was nervous, but Michael could tell that she had grown stronger in the days since this all started. She was facing her fear, just like he had promised her she would. The judge turned to Lily. Tell me, young lady, who do you want to live with? Lily took a deep breath, her hands gripping the edge of the chair. Her voice, though small, was filled with courage. I want to live with my dad. He's been there for me. He's the one who takes care of me. He's my family. Tears welled up in Michael's eyes as he heard her speak. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment when everything became clear. Lily wasn't just his daughter by blood. She was his daughter by love, by care, by the bond they had built. The judge nodded, clearly moved by Lily's words. Thank you, young lady. That's all I need to hear. The courtroom fell silent as the judge deliberated, but Michael's heart beat loud in his chest. He couldn't focus on anything else. This was it. This was the decision that would change their lives forever. Minutes later, the judge returned with his decision. After careful consideration of all evidence and testimony, I have come to my conclusion. Michael Bennett will be awarded full custody of Lily Parker. James Parker is not deemed fit to care for her at this time. Michael couldn't believe what he was hearing. He looked over at Lily, whose eyes were wide with relief, and Grace, who was quietly crying beside him. This was the moment they had fought for, and it was finally happening. The judge turned to James, who was sitting silently at the front. "You're not to have contact with Lily unless otherwise determined by this court." James stood up slowly, his face tight with rage, but he said nothing. He left the courtroom without another word. Michael turned to Lily, who was now standing beside him. He knelt down to her level, his heart swelling with pride. "We did it, kiddo," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "You're safe. You're home." Lily's eyes filled with tears, and she wrapped her arms around him. "I knew you'd protect me, Dad. I knew you would." Michael held her tightly, never wanting to let go. In that moment, he knew that no matter what challenges they faced, they were a family, a real family. And as they left the courtroom together, Michael realized that this was just the beginning of their new life. A life built on love, trust, and a promise to always fight for each other.